Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's about past, so we'll make a start. Quieten down, please. Hello. It's great to see such a big crowd for the last session. It certainly says something for your staying power and fortitude to get this far in the MTB. Today's session, this morning's session, MSG 320, is what's new in the second generation digital dashboards. I'm Mike Platt. I'm a PM in the digital dashboard group, actually the BPG strategy group as it is, back in Redmond. Just before we start, quick question. Who here works for Microsoft? Could I have a show of hands, all those people that work for Microsoft? I certainly do anyway. I don't know about the rest of you. Okay. Hands up, who wants to actually hear the truth about our products and how they actually work and what doesn't work? Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you the truth as I see it. Okay. And what I've seen and what works and what doesn't work. Please respect that. I don't expect some of this stuff to go to customers. It's up to you to put the right slant on things for your customers. But I want to tell you what works, what doesn't work. And I also want to say where my bias is. I'm a SQL Server guy. It's my background. So I'm not very keen on certain other web stores, or certain other stores that are around. Certain other stores that are around. So I will say, you know, there's problems with SQL as well. But you have to understand where I'm coming from before I start this talk. Okay. A little bit of history also before I start, because it's actually the digital dashboard's a very difficult thing to understand what's happening with it and where it's come from. Originally, a couple of years ago, my group, which was a strategy group inside BPG, looked at what was happening on the desktop, looked at what was happening in terms of portals, and decided that we could do something inside the browser to provide some personalized services. And that, of course, was the first version of the digital dashboard. Now, we're actually just a strategy group. We are not a product group. We do actually have some developers in our group, but we are not a product group, so we can't actually produce products at all. So what we've had to do, of course, is evangelize that inside Microsoft back into the product groups and get the product groups to pick things up. Well, anybody who's worked with the product groups will tell you it's not a terribly easy thing to get them to put things into their products, especially if it's come from another group inside Microsoft. So it's taken a while, but we are now getting there, and I'll talk in quite a lot of detail about what other product groups are going to be doing. I'm in a fairly unique position from that point of view, because I see quite a lot of the other product groups that are around. I see what they're doing, what their plans are, and where they're going. So a lot of what I'm going to be talking about here is about other products and the other products' plans in the future. Again, please respect those, because I don't particularly want to hear from product group PMs about the customers saying what their plans are as according to me. So let's start off. And what we're going to talk about is, first of all, what is a digital dashboard, the Resource Kit 2.0. Then we're going to talk a little bit about building and deploying digital dashboards, and then where we're going at the end. And really that's what I want to focus on, is where we're going, both the dashboard and also the products that are picking up the dashboard. So things like Tahoe, things like... hands up, who's been to Tahoe talk here? Tahoe? Yeah, okay, quite a lot. And, of course, Office 10 as well. So, actually, the other question I wanted to ask, how many people here use the first version of the digital dashboard, 1.0? Wow, remarkable. Well, all those that use the first version know its limitations, to say the least. You know, it really was very much a kit of bits. And, of course, if you actually used it, you found it was quite a lot of work to actually start building things with it. And we certainly learned an awful lot from that. And we actually then went on to the second version. But first of all, let's talk about what it is. What the digital dashboard is now is basically a set of component parts, what we're calling web parts, what we're called nuggets. They're web parts put inside a framework which runs inside either the browser or, in fact, anything that runs the Trident engine. So if you've got anything that runs the Trident engine, things like Outlook is an obvious one. You can run a dashboard inside it. And, of course, that includes things even like Access, which is running the Trident engine. So you can actually run dashboards in a number of different things running the Trident IE engine. And what it allows you to do is it allows you to put these nuggets or components up onto the screen and actually then connect those nuggets to back-end information sources, back-end services, and so on and so forth. And this is quite a key element, because actually there's two parts to it. First of all, it's customizable. You can move things around and get it exactly as the user wants and meet the user preferences. And also, more importantly, as we move forward, it actually provides a little interface, a little front-end interface to back-end web services. And actually that's really key, especially as we get into the .NET area. There's been a lot of talks here about .NET from the developer point of view and from the server point of view, and even from the services point of view, but probably not an awful lot about what's actually going to happen on the desktop. What's the client experience of .NET? Well, I believe a lot of that is going to be around these these nuggets as they were, but now they're, as I say, called web parts, where a service comes up as one of these components, and you can just use that component and you can move that around and aggregate the components together. It actually makes a lot of differences to the business model out on the web. I did this talk and some demonstrations at TechEd, and one of the demonstrations you'll see is with Expedia parts, and Travelocity came up and said, why don't you do this with Travelocity? And I said, I can. You can just go to Travelocity's site, you can pull the information out of their site, this is the web, and put it into a web part, and then start using that web part as a customizable part on the screen. The problem with that, of course, as Travelocity realized straight away when they saw it, is they lose all their revenue because they lose their advertising banner and they lose all their cross-selling. It actually makes a big difference. The whole of this idea of a web as a service makes a big difference to the business models. We really need to, as an industry, I think, to think that through. But certainly it becomes very apparent when you start building web parts. The other thing about the dashboard, so the dashboard is the front-end framework, web parts sit inside that, and then you can deploy that different places in the organization. Obviously you have personal ones, you have team-based web parts, and there's a lot in Office 10 around team-based web parts, and what was team folders. And then there's the enterprise ones, and say Tahoe, for instance, got the search and news enterprise web parts already built into it. So it was launched about over a year ago with the first one, and it has. I mean, it's really demonstrating it to customers, taking it to things like TechEd. It is remarkable how much the end users actually like the dashboard. It's a very customizable experience. It really does resonate, and it really resonates with the whole idea of using the web as a service, and actually giving them personal experience. There have been a number of sample deployments of the first dashboard. It is difficult, especially with the first one, to do large-scale deployments. We did the second one back TechEd, in fact. It was the launch was TechEd. Again, a lot of very good feedback because there's a lot more in the second one than the first one. The first one didn't have very much in it. And again, there's a number of sample deployments. Now, this brings me on to the whole area of scalability. I want to touch on it again at the end as well. But actually, today, we are very much, that's why it's a DDRK, a resource kit. It's not a product, and in fact, there are some parts of the underlying platform which we need to be improved in order to be able to start scaling up to very large deployments. And we're working on those, and we're waiting on those. And again, I think probably the Tahoe people have talked about this as well, and I'll talk in more detail. We do have people who are building things. We do actually have some people who've done some fairly large-scale deployments, but I won't kid you on this. We don't have anybody out there, in my knowledge, who's done very large systems on the dashboard today. We actually believe that there are some ways around that, and I'll talk about those. But we're certainly looking for people who are doing large deployments, and we're also saying at the moment that really you need to wait for the products to come along before you start talking about production deployments. We would not recommend you deploying the kit today in production. Okay? Please wait for the products. What we learned from the first one, as I said, there was a lot of enthusiasm for it, but it was much too difficult to use, the first version. The knowledge workers themselves needed a much better set of content and the ability to go and find that content. Offline support became important. In fact, 2.0 perhaps doesn't have as good offline support as we'd like. One of the problems you'll find if you install the kit that you have is that, especially if you install it here, that Windows actually drops the IP addresses very, very quickly. Windows 2000, NT didn't. NT was quite nice. It held on to an IP address for quite a long while. Windows 2000 doesn't. It drops the IP address, goes to 127.0.0.1 very quickly. And that actually confuses IIS quite a lot. And so therefore, the dashboard, which is running as part of IIS, gets confused. If you've installed the kits you've got here, you've obviously done that here, probably offline, you'll find that perhaps you have trouble actually accessing the dashboard. You need to go to localhost. If you go to localhost, you'll find it's a lot easier to use. It actually starts working, in fact. And in some cases, you do have to go to 127.0.0.1. The other trick somebody told me yesterday is if you just, I don't know if it's true, I haven't tried it, but if you just pop the Ethernet card out of your machine, the network card out of your machine, then Windows reconfigures very quickly and actually will start picking up, IIS will start picking up the IP addresses correctly again. I haven't tried it, but he assured me it worked. Okay, so whilst those are fine things for offline, we actually need to do a lot better than that. In particular, we need to do a lot better in terms of replication of storage and things like that. And in fact, the next version of the kit, the 3.0 version of the kit, will actually have a lot more offline support in it. In terms of development, the original kit really had to write from scratch. You had to write your own SPs, even for the most basic functions, and we really needed to provide a much more standard framework for that, which we have in the 2.0 kit. And we've also, in conjunction with the Office group, the Office 10 people, come up with a full schema for web parts and what's in a web part. And we'll talk about that in more detail, but that's hopefully going to be picked up by everybody across the corporation and people outside as well, so that we end up with a standard schema for these front-end components. And then finally, we needed to be able to do some administration of these things and deploy them, and certainly in the first version of the kit, there wasn't any of those. So what we've done in the second version of the kit, the one you've got in your bags, actually, we've put a lot more of this stuff in. And as I say, you have the kit, it's at version 2.01. 2.0 went out at TechEd. Only the people who went to TechEd got it. 2.01's got a lot more stuff in it, well, a lot of bug fixes for a start. But on top of that, it's actually got a lot of international support in there as well. Okay. So in the kit itself, which you should have got, as I say, this is what you got in your when you went and picked up your CDs and everything. And in here is the second kit. It's 2.01. And what it does is it has a set of sample dashboards in here, supporting things like SQL, Windows 2000, supports Outlook and IE, and it has this thing called Dashboard Services component. I'll talk about that in more detail. It also has a web part gallery, a set of sample web parts to show you how some ideas about how to build web parts. I wouldn't even say they were particularly best practice code. I wrote a number of them, so I certainly wouldn't claim they were best practice code. But it gives you an idea of sort of the things you can do with the web parts. There's some white papers, and then there's a web part builder, which adds into Visual IntDev. You need SP3 and Visual IntDev to actually get that to work and add that in. And I'll talk about what the web part builder does in more detail. Actually, let me just, at this point, just flip across and show you what you've actually got on the kit itself. So this is the kit. Missed it. Okay, so this is the kit that you've got, and if you look at it, it'll fire up. As you put it in your machine, it'll fire up like this. And you've got what's new, you've got building digital dashboards, and a couple of the important things down here is you've got the Windows 2000 file system dashboard, the SQL Server dashboard. You click on those and they'll install. The 2000 web store dashboard, which isn't included and we haven't finished yet. We were hoping to get that done for MEC, for Mech, but there's been some problems with doing that, and I don't think we're going to hit that date. The other side of things is actually how you build web parts, and there's some white papers on that, and then the web part builder itself. Typically, I don't use the web part an awful lot, and I'll tell you why you need the web part in a moment, but in general, I prefer to do things in Notepad rather than some of our tools, but it's just a personal preference. In terms of terminology, what is a web part? A web part is a component that contains and provides the front end for any web-based content or services, really. And then what there is the dashboard, is the rendering of those on the page. Now, the big difference between the 1.0 kit and the 2.0 kit is that the rendering on the 2.0 kit is actually done by a set of ASPs. Well, not actually the physical rendering, but what's actually going to be put up on the screen is done on the server, okay, and then sent down as HTML or XML down to the client, and the client just does the rendering. On the 1.0 kit, pretty well everything ran on the client. So there's a big difference there. There's a lot of server-centric type functionality going on inside the dashboard today at the back end. There's a whole dashboard factory, a whole set of ASPs, and that's what this factory is, a set of ASP, XML, XSL files. They take those web parts and they create the composite view which they send down to the browser. This means the browser can just be a pretty standard browser. Clearly, if you're running ActiveX controls, those ActiveX controls will have to download as well. And most of the advanced functionality, things like Outlook or any of the Office web component type functionality, obviously has to load down. But in general, this is just straightforward HTML that gets sent down. And so it should run on Navigator. Well, yeah, it should. And in general, it's not too bad. It certainly works reasonably well on 6, but unfortunately, 6 seems to be very flaky. I don't know about what your experiences have been, but certainly the people I've talked to that have had any in-depth experience with Navigator 6 say it's a pretty shaky piece of kit. And so, whilst it will work in 6, Most people don't seem to want to deploy 6. It doesn't work very well in 3 because 3 really is so back level. We need some fairly basic things in terms of cascading style sheet support and that sort of area, DHTML type support in order to do some of the things we do. And Nav 3 just doesn't have that, so it really doesn't work at all very well in Nav 3. The other thing is that I don't think Nav supports is the whole concept of iframes, and again, certainly for some of the scalability issues, I know that we recommend iframes, and again, that causes you problems in Navigator. But in general, it should just render and come up in pretty well any reasonably up-to-date browser. The next area is a catalog. You've got these web parts, these pieces of services. You want to be a library somewhere where people can go and pick them up, and that's what the web part catalog provides. It's just a library of parts provided back on the server. You can select those, and so there's this library, and then you load those down into your own individual dashboard, and then the dashboard the factory renders those up on the screen. And the application is the whole thing put together, the support pieces, customization pages, and web parts. The difference between this and a portal, is the dashboard a portal? Quite a common sort of question. I have a real trouble because there's no real definition of what a portal is. It's the front end of a portal, sure. I mean, a dashboard is used by a number of companies, like Infomage and Plumtree, for instance. They're looking at using the dashboard as the front end of their portal systems. But of course, there's a lot more to a portal than just the front end. There's also things like the actual services you're building yourself, services inside the organization, and so on. And in general terminology, the portal means much more than just the front end. It does actually mean those services on the back end and providing the interfaces to those services. As time goes on, and as the services become much more web-based and XML-based, then the dashboard, because it's just picking up standard XML services, will become much more of a fully fledged portal. But today I wouldn't really position it as a portal. I think I've talked about what a web part is. It's a reusable component. We put one version of it in the highest level directory, in the catalog. And then anybody else can go and pick that up and customize and modify that and keep their own local copy of that. So it's reusable from that point of view, and then it comes up and you can move that around the screen wherever you want it. So you have a user interface through to the back-end services. It's what was a nugget. We've actually defined this services as a schema. It's not really a schema in my mind. It's more of a set of properties, but we call it a schema. Because what you need if you've got a set of services when you're putting it on the screen is a couple of things. Clearly is the service itself, so there's the link to the service or the information coming back from the service. And the second thing is a whole load of information about that service, where it's going to be rendered on the screen, how big it is, what color it is, all that attribute information, which typically you don't get. So what we've had to do is we've had to put both lots of that piece of information into the web part schema. And the web part schema defines what the connection is, and it also defines how that's actually rendered on the screen and where it's rendered on the screen and so on and so forth. And that's what the schema defines. Now, it's extensible. We can add on to it, and we will add on to it as time goes on. But the thing is, then when we actually store this back down, we actually have to store those attributes back down. We have to store this schema back down. And we actually store the schema back as part of the attributes in the file system, not as part of the contents. Okay? So if you go and actually have a look at a web part actually just looks like an HTML page. Okay, and you go and look at that HTML, and you'll see maybe it's a link or a link to content or a piece of XML or whatever, and that's all you'll see, because we're actually storing the attributes about where it should be rendered on the screen as part of the file system attributes, part of the file system properties in Windows 2000 for the file system dashboard, or as a set of properties in a table for SQL Server, and again also for Exchange as well, Exchange Web Store. Which is fine because it means you don't ever see those additional the web part attributes on those web pages. It does mean if you copy those off onto a system that doesn't understand that there are some additional attributes in the file system properties, they will get lost. So if you copy a web part down onto 98 and then copy it back up to 2000 again, you'll suddenly find all your position information and your layout information disappears, because 98 doesn't understand that these extra characteristics have to be passed, this schema has to be passed backwards and forwards. So in order to do that, in order to get around that problem, we can actually export web parts as a thing called a DWP format. DWP is just an XML file rather than HTML. And the XML includes all these attributes as well, and that allows you to then pass these things around. Why did we go this way? We went this way because actually that's logic. That's the way that we should be moving forward. We should be moving forward with this concept of web paths as services and then sets of attributes that are associated with those services. And that's exactly how things like the Windows 2000 NTFS system actually works, and that's how it's meant to work. And we use DAV, WebDAV, to actually go and manipulate those properties as well. But it does mean that in the short term, if you, as I say, you need to be careful if you copy things out onto floppy or anything like that into a DOS, into a DOS file system, because it will actually lose that attribute information. Okay, so these are some of the dashboards that are around in the company at the moment. For instance, I think the top one, left one is the Tahoe one. Yeah, the Tahoe. There's our own dashboard web, our own internal dashboard website, which you can go and have a look at. There's a demonstration site called Manti Motors, which is actually done by the SQL people. And there's a home site. Each of the different product groups are doing different pieces of the dashboard, which means we have to mesh it all together. And it means, from your point of view, it's perhaps not all too apparent exactly what's happening at any one time. The actual file system dashboard is done by my group. The SQL dashboard is done by the SQL group, surprise, surprise, and the SQL people have quite a large headcount now to do additional dashboard functionality. So they're doing 3.0. They're doing the next version of the digital dashboard kit. The Tahoe people have picked, the Office people are actually the people that are doing, Office 10 people are the people that are doing both the schemas, and they're also doing the version of the dashboard that will be in mod, will be in Office 10 mod. And Tahoe have then picked up their version and are using their version. So, there are a number of different dashboards out there with different underlying web storage engines, for instance. And again, you must be aware where each one comes from. So on this page, for instance, the one on the top left is actually a Tahoe digital dashboard implementation with Tahoe web parts. The one in the right is one from our group, which is the file system group. Bottom left is a SQL one, and the bottom right is a SQL one as well. Actually, these are just web parts working to a common schema, so hopefully we should all be able to work in the same dashboards. At the moment, that's true. Whether that will always remain true is debatable. We're certainly trying very hard to make sure that we all pick up common schemas from different groups and keep the whole thing in sync. Okay. So in terms of the end user experience, you have these web parts. This is what it looks like. These, in the boxes in red, are web parts inside a browser. You have a navigation bar at the top, which is provided by the dashboard. Allows you to navigate through them, through the pages you have. The web part itself, has a whole load of attributes associated with it, and the catalog stores the web parts and allows you to put those up on the screen. So let's go and have a look at some of this stuff. First of all, one of the other things you got in your kit was this handy credit card-sized dashboard CD. If you're actually going to work with the dashboard, I'd probably recommend, certainly in terms of demonstrations and that sort of thing, I'd certainly recommend using this rather than this. Okay, because this is pretty well packaged up. It's a lot easier to use. It's got some nice web parts already built into it, and it's actually a very simple installation, deinstallation, and so on and so forth. It also works very nicely offline. You don't have to mess around too much with to get it to work offline. So what I want to show you is actually this little demo CD to start off with. Sorry, thank you very much. Okay, so this is the demo CD, and it says where you can order it from as well and get more copies of it. But then you just go into the setup instructions, and it tells you basically how to install IIS. This will run on Pro. I'm actually running this on Windows 2000 Pro here, or Server, of course. If you're on Pro, you need to install the IIS. You just click on Setup in here, and it will go and install a digital dashboard. Now, this is a file system digital dashboard it's installing, so it just says what it's going to install, standard license agreements. And then it says where you want your dashboard to work, because this is, as I say, a server-based system. So it says where's your web server, which is going to be the local one, what the server name is. Next, initializing. Now we'll load down the files. Should load the files down. Don't you just love it when demos go wrong like this? me just try it one more time. Who knows? I must have done this 100 times in the last 2 days. That's the first time it's done that. Okay. Okay. Now what it then has to do is... It is actually working now. Okay, now what it actually has to do now is it does have to stop and restart RIS. And so what I'll just show you as it's doing that, because it does take a little while to stop and restart IS, is that first of all this also comes with how to actually add in things like the PST instructions. It also comes with a demo script and a set of AVIs which talks you through exactly what you need to say. Okay, here's the demo script. Okay, fully scripted, and then, as I say, AVIs as well. You can go and watch the AVIs. And that's got some commentary with it to explain how to do it. Okay, so now we have installed it. Okay, and we just click on OK. It goes straight into the dashboard it's installed. And you can see here, this is a sample dashboard. Now, this isn't the same sample dashboard you'll get with this. This just comes up with a standard DDRK. It will come up with just the welcome screen. This has got things in it already. These are web parts. Each piece of this is a web part. So this is the welcome one. This is an Outlook view control, Outlook folder view to go and look at that. There's a search engine here. There's things like videos, weather conditions. These are all offline as it happens, so that you can actually this machine's offline at the moment, running offline. So you can go off and demo this stuff pretty easily. So you can see the sort of things you can put up as part of your digital dashboard. And what I'd just like to show you is actually how you can then start moving this stuff around, because we've got a number of pages. This is the navigation bar up at the top, content layout and settings, and then actually the dashboards we have. So this is the welcome one. I've got a news dashboard as well. Okay, so that's got new, information in it about the news. Okay, and I'm offline at the moment. Yep, let's put it back online. Because this is running off the server, it has to run online, right? So let's just restart it. Try again. Okay, so go back in here. Go look at the news. That when you start getting the rendering wrong, it means that you're just using cache pages and you're not actually getting USP pages from back end. So you have to be online. So you've got things like at news. There's a number of third parties have provided web parts already. It's quite interesting what's happening in that space, because people like MSN, for instance, have actually provided both the web parts and also a back-end service to connect those web parts connecting. Now, at the moment, it's just a URL back in the MSN site, which you connect to and start pushing data down. But you can see as we get into the web as a service, how that will become a site which just pipes down XML to the front end, to the dashboard, and the XML is then rendered by the dashboard. And certainly there's a lot of third parties who are out there looking at starting to build XML generating URLs for their websites that you can, so that you can connect to those. There's a travel one. I talked a little bit earlier about Expedia. Literally, I built these, and it's really easy, because all you do is you can literally go up to a site like Expedia. You can just take the script. You can see this is a piece of script that's come straight off the site. I mean, you just go into View Source, pull the script down, put it into a web part, and hey presto, that's exactly how I built these. And in fact, in general, although the front end of something like Expedia changes quite a lot, they very rarely change the back-end connection, obviously, because it connects to their back-end services. So even though these driving directions now don't look like the ones that come out on the Expedia site, it doesn't actually matter, because I'm still using the same connections they use as part of their website. So you can actually go and use these sort of web parts with a fair degree that they're actually going to stay as they are. One caveat, of course, on this is you'll notice I'm using websites that are part of Microsoft websites to take information off. So I do have permission to do that. Clearly, if you start going and taking information from code from Travelocity's site, that is a violation. You're not allowed to do that. I'm not recommending anybody goes and starts pirating code from anybody. So you should make sure you have permissions of people's sites before you actually start using their code. Interestingly enough, Travelocity wouldn't let me do it. They actually said, no, I couldn't use their code and ship it out, because I was very happy to put Travelocity parts on here, but because of the implication to their business model, they weren't prepared to let me do that. Okay, so that's actually how you can build some fairly simple web parts on the dashboard. Let's have a quick look at how we can move those around, for instance. And we can go into Layout, and Layout provides you a layout page which allows you to start moving things around inside the dashboard. Okay, so we have here the web parts, and say we actually decided that we don't want the weather over here, we want the weather over here, and we want the search down over this side. We can just drag and drop things and move them around like that. And of course, you can see they start, the weather comes up here, and the search engine should be down over here, which it is. Another little caveat here is that page we saw a moment ago, that layout page, is actually just a representation of some information that's being held back in the dashboard. So it's not necessarily always correct. It's like, Windows, if you add a new file in the file system, it doesn't necessarily appear straight away in the Explorer. So the same thing's true with these layout screens as well. They're DHTML screens, but actually they're just picking up information from the underlying store. And sometimes what they're showing is not the correct store underneath. It's correct representation of what's being stored in the stores underneath. However, what's being held in the stores underneath is almost always correct, right? So don't get fooled by that. Okay, so that shows us how we can move things around. Let's just go and have a look at how we can add a new part to the dashboard. We have, these are the parts we actually have in our present dashboard. The ones with ticks against them are the ones we're actually looking at. So we've got the weather, we've got Outlook folders and item views, we've got search, video, and so on. We have some other ones that we can go and access. So we have this regional sales detail web part. If I click on that, go OK, it will now add that into my web part. Now this is actually going and accessing pages on another domain. This is this is a pivot table, which is pulling information out of a SQL server. And you can see here we've now added that web part in, and it's that easy to put new web parts in, take web parts out, and so on and so forth. So this is very much a very easy end user experience, and that's the way we've tried to provide it. We've also got this web part catalog, list of all the web parts. These are standard web parts that come with the kit. Things like charting, searching, MSNBC. We've got some third-party ones like Centra provided some web parts. Outlook, obviously, quite a lot of those using the view control and so on, weather, etc., etc. So we've provided as part of the kit quite a lot of different web parts straight out of the box. Missed the button. Okay, that's probably all I want to show for the moment on the web part side of things. How does it actually work under the hood? The key thing to know about the Dashboard 2.0, it is server-based. Okay? So on the right-hand side of the screen, you've got a pretty standard sort of setup that everybody has for the web. You have a set of browsers hitting a set of web services. Those web services can be web servers inside the organization, outside the organization, outside the firewall. Who cares? And they provide HTML backwards and forwards between those. The way the dashboard works is the dashboard actually sits inside the browser. You go to a special URL. And that URL redirects to the dashboard server. Okay? It actually comes up as factory. This demo CD comes up as demo factory, but the real one comes up as factory. And it goes to this factory dashboard over here on the left-hand side. And what that does is it goes and finds out what web parts you have on your page, pulls those web parts up, and then renders those web parts back up onto the screen. Now, when it does that, there's two ways of doing it. Either it can just pass the URLs back as part of the web part to the browser, and then the browser will then go and get the other information from the web server, or it can go itself to the back-end web server, pull the information, and then generate a whole page on the server and send it up. Well, clearly one of those ways is much more scalable than the other. If you actually just sending a pointer link to the browser, then the browsers are taking all the load when it comes to go and get the information from the back-end servers. If you actually do everything through the server, and get the server to pull the information in for you. Clearly, if you have 2,000 browsers they're all hitting that one server, and that one server is then making 2,000 requests out to the back-end web services. And that's the two ways you can generate web parts. You can either have web parts which are running in their own iframe and therefore render up on the browser, or you can have web parts which are rendered as embedded web parts, and those are then pulled back through the dashboard server. And the second way does cause some problems, because clearly when we go back from the dashboard server back to the back-end sites, we're starting talking about a lot of calls going out simultaneously, a lot of concurrent threads being run. The snag with it is that when we actually go back out to the web server, of course, we're just using parts of IE to do that. We actually use some of the IE DLLs to go and pick up information from the back-end web servers. And in particular, a thing called WinINet is a particular DLL that IE uses to go and access all its web servers information. Now, that's fine. WinINet works well when it's just a single browser, because there's a single user accessing a single set of web pages, and it works very well. But it's not being built in a scalable manner. Okay, so what happens if you get to about, I don't know, probably 10, it depends on how heavy the load is, but sort of in the tens to 100 area, then WinINet starts to cause problems and starts to fail. And basically, you just don't get the information back. The information doesn't come back from back-end services. We all know about that. I mean, the whole corporation knows about the WinINet problem, or back in Redmond anyway. And the WinINet people, the IE people, are busy building a multi-threaded, highly scalable WinINet version. There's an alpha of it out, and if you Tahoe at the moment are using the alpha version in some parts of their products, in some part of their dashboards. But we haven't actually shipped it. It will actually ship, I think, the first beta 1 of WinINet, I think, will ship in as part of Tahoe beta 2, which is due out any time now, I guess. And then the actual final product will certainly go into Tahoe. So if you pick up the Tahoe release, it will actually have the scalable WinINet in there as well. Quite how else it's going to get out there, we're not too sure about at the moment. Clearly, it's got to go into a part of IE. It'll clearly be part of IE6, but we'd obviously like to get it out before IE6 for people who are using things like file system dashboards. But at the moment, the only shipped vehicle we have at the moment is Tahoe. That will certainly get around the problem we have with the services trying to get out to the back-end server. But again, just bear in mind, if you have 2,000, if you have your dashboard server with 2,000 users on it, and they're all using embedded web parts, they will all be going back out to that. There will be a big load on the server. So if we actually have a look at the architecture of the server itself, bearing in mind that the server is actually going and getting information from the web store as well, from the web store, the web itself. What we have is up on the dashboard, we have web parts rendered in the dashboard, which I've shown you already. Then we have the dashboard server, which has a thing called the factory, a set of ASPs. In fact, there's two parts to that. There's the factory set of ASPs, and you can go and look at those and change them, and I know a number of people have done that. And then the second part of that is a storage model, a thing called store.vbs, a set of scripts, which actually then go and connect to the back-end stores. And you can have any one of those three back-end stores. You can have the web store, which is in the file system. So you can have the file system, and you can have SQL Server. And each one of those, we talk to all of those with WebDAV. Now, the Windows 2000 supports WebDAV natively, which is how we can do it to the file system. SQL Server doesn't, actually. But in SQL Server, when you get the kit, SQL Server actually ship a DAV driver for SQL Server, WebDAV driver, which installs under IIS as an add-in. And then you can actually access SQL Server through that. The web store also has native WebDAV support in there, because we really focus on DAV. I think that I personally think DAV's the right way to go for data access. It does raise some questions about ADO and CDO as well, because they do seem to sort of overlap in areas. But I'm firmly convinced that DAV is the right way to go for this sort of data access. But it has caused some problems in the short term, because the implementation on these particular stores is slightly variant. So we've had to make some changes for that. But perhaps more importantly, it also causes a few problems when you actually try and remote those. Clearly, it would be nice just to have SQL Server on a separate server. At the moment, that doesn't work. And the same is true of the web store. And as we get further down the track, then hopefully we'll fix those problems, and you can start to remote things as well and take some of the load off the servers. OK, in terms of accessing parts, you have the factory. you give it a dashboard ID, and that dashboard ID has associated as part of it the user's user ID, and so therefore each individual person will have their own individual dashboard, which comes back. Take that ID, retrieves the parts for that person, and returns those back up to the screen. It has underneath that these store.vbs storage modules, which then go and access the back end. The back end is accessed, as I said, through DAV, through port 80 and HTTP, and those have methods for creating, deleting, modifying. Obviously, the dashboard information is stored down there, also the web parts, and also this whole business of attributes going into the files that are stored back down. And that's what the next point basically says, is Windows 2000 has got two streams, content and properties. Exchange has got folder items and properties again. And SQL actually then takes the DAV streams and puts them into records in a database. If you go into SQL, so if you fire up SQL Server Dashboard, you go in there, you'll find actually the whole schema for how SQL Server stores the dashboard, and it does a whole load of security information in there as well. It's quite interesting to see actually how they store the dashboard and the web part information in SQL Server. In terms of generating working web parts, first of all, web parts are this DWP format. It's XML with all the attribute information and the content information, and that's how you pass them around. When you actually then put that in the catalog, the dashboard actually recognizes the DWP format and will just pull it in and convert the DWP into HTML and hold that in the catalog. So the dashboard will actually read the stuff in as DWP format, and so you don't have to worry about that. The snag is when you actually want to take a new web part you've built, which of course is generated as an HTML file, and actually then send that to somebody else, because of course you don't have the DWP version of that, and the dashboard today doesn't create the DWP version, so you actually have to use this thing called the web part builder down the bottom here. Okay, and the web part builder will pick up your HTML file with the attributes and generate one of these DWPs for it. And that's pretty well all I use it for, is the exporting of the XML, because the dashboard itself can do the importing. We actually put the import in very late. Originally, we were going to have this web part builder as being able to do export and import, but we actually managed to put the code in to do the import as part of the dashboard itself. We just never got around to, we didn't have time to do the export function. Hopefully, it would be nice to do that, because then we wouldn't need the web part builder. Web part builder is a visual dev add-in, and it allows you to go and modify those properties and look at the properties, change those, and then store those properties back down again. Because, of course, you can't do that with a standard file, because you just can't see those properties. It's very, very disconcerting to see these files that have got zero content in them, because clearly if all the information for the web part is held as in the attributes, then the actual HTML page has got nothing in it, and it shows as an empty file. It doesn't mean it's empty, it means that the stuff, everything is stored as part of the XML. Sorry, as part of the attributes of the file. And I understand actually that's how Tahoe and Office 10 do it. They actually store most of the information as part of the attribute information. So if you look in the web store under Tahoe and Office 10, you'll actually not see any content in there, because they store the content as part of the attributes. I haven't checked myself, but that's I understand how they do it. Okay. In terms of what you can have in the content, is first of all, you can have link content, so you just have the link itself, it connects out to some sort of back-end link, and that will then come back down onto the machine. You can either have that running in its own iframe on the dashboard, and of course that gets around the scalability issues, or you can run that inside the dashboard itself. You can have embedded content where you've actually put script inside the web part itself, which runs. If you have embedded content, you can actually have a single master part of content, okay, and then everybody else will take copies of that. And then when you change the master part, all the copies underneath that will change. One of the biggest problems with deployment is say you build a web part for 2,000 people, and then suddenly realize you want to make a change in it, or worse, you've got a bug. Then you'd have to go around and touch everybody's machines. The idea with the master part is you can say, this is a master part. The dashboard then keeps a link of what's hanging off that master part. So when you change the master part, it will then go and change all those web parts that are hanging off that. And then finally, you can actually have some script in there again as a part of embedded content, and the script gets executed again on the server during page execution. Okay, now if you actually have one of these embedded components, not an iframe component where you're just putting the whole of the browser inside the browser, but you've actually now got these dashboards with all these web parts. The web parts, of course, can communicate from one to another using the IE DOM. Right? So they all exist as far as the DOM's concerned. But it's very difficult to see other web parts because there's no registration. The IE DOM doesn't actually give you any registration information. So what we've provided is a thing called the Digital Dashboard Services Component, DDSC. And what that does is it's actually another web part which sits on every page, on every dashboard page, and it allows you to go and register your web part with that component. And then what it allows you to do then is you can actually pass information to the DDSC, which will then pass information on to the other web parts on your page. So you can register and you have an eventing and notification information. That pretty well explains how it's done as well. It's actually done by the factory. The factory always puts the DDSC in there. The DDSC is an ActiveX control. So again, it won't work on nav or non-Microsoft browsers. And it gets loaded down when the first time you load the dashboard and sits there. Now, again, you don't have to. And we are looking at a scripting DDSC for back-level support, although I'm not quite sure where that's got to be honest. What it provides is it provides you the ability to find parts. So you can register, and because parts are registered with the DDSC, you can go and query the DDSC and say what parts are registered. It allows you to notify when there's an event and use an eventing mechanism from one web part to the next. Allows you to hold things like state of both part and the session. So you can actually hold state across multiple pages and multiple refreshes of the page because it's held in the DDSC. And then, as I say, the state itself for the parts can be held in there as well. A couple of caveats about the DDSC. The DDSC is very powerful. It gives you the ability to do some really, really nice things on the screen. It doesn't work with iframes. It doesn't work on non-Microsoft browsers. I've used it fairly extensively for sort of notification and eventing. I haven't done a lot with the session state, and certainly as you get into the more advanced things, like any product, as you get further down the track, you find the documentation gets thinner and thinner. And certainly when you start getting into some of the more advanced functionality of DDSC, the documentation becomes a little bit more challenging to understand. Okay, so what does this actually look like as part of a dashboard? First of all, let me just go and build a couple of parts. I'll show you a couple of parts anyway. So we go into content and we say we want to build a new part, create a new web part down here. And we're just going to call this something like MSN. I've got an MSN page cached on here, but it could be any outside web page. And what you have is, first of all, some information up here which is actually going to go into your attributes. So it's got things like position of it on the page, whether it wants to be on the top, left, center, right. When we did the layouts earlier on, okay, we have these 5 areas on the screen, left, center, right, top and bottom, and you can then put the web part in each one of those, so you can say where the web part wants to be. We'll just put it into the center for the time being. You can say where you want it to be in the column, because each web part you can say as a default whether you want to be at the top, which is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, how many web parts you want to be below on the page, whether you want it to be displayed in a frame or not. This isn't an iframe, this is just like a box around the outside. Because this is all to do with how the thing looks on the screen. These are all the attributes. Whether it's expanded or minimized, and whether it should have a fixed height and width. And then it has show advanced settings, and this is actually the content. This is how you put the content in. So you say what type of content do you want in here? Do you want HTML, VB, Java, XML? And we're just going to get it from my local machine. Just see, go on. I think that's where it is. And this is where when you click isolate here, it then runs inside an iframe, which means it can't use the DDSC, but it is more scalable. But the other thing about it is certainly when you're doing debug, it's a really good idea to have that switched on. Because if you make a mistake on the link, or something goes wrong in your script, then it will take the whole of the dashboard page out, because it's all running as one page. Yeah? So if that page goes out, and that means all the administration stuff on the top and all the rest of it, then it can be quite, not difficult, but annoying to have to go back and go in through some other way to find your web part to go and modify it again. So in debug, always have that on. Okay? If you actually have some content you want to put in, embedded content or some script you want to run, you can just type that in there. If you put XS, you can actually use XSL in here to to do a transform, and you can say what the style sheet is you want to do, and indeed you can have embedded XSL as well. I'm not an XSL coder, so I haven't got much of an idea how that's done. You can say this is a master web part, or sorry, this is going to link to a master web part and where that is. You can then say whether you want the users to be able to remove or minimize the web part. Clearly, as an administrator, you want to be able to make sure if you build a web part and you want it always to be there for all your users, you want to deselect some of these things. You can generate namespaces for programmatically using your part, personalization, and so on and so forth, and data. So we go OK on that. OK, we go back, and you'll find now my MSN part is included. I go back, and providing I typed in the... OK, yes. You see up here, I've now just included an MSN page. And it's that easy to add a web part in using the dashboard. Okay? You just literally point to it, and you can link it in. You can put script in there. You can go to somebody else's website, pull the script down, and put it in there. One of the other caveats I want to talk about is that, of course, when you put something into the page like this, if it has anything like function calls or naming, because there are other web parts on here, they may also use the same function call or names. Okay? So what you have to do is you have to make sure that they all have a unique name. Well, that's a really difficult thing to do because you haven't got a clue who else is on the page with you. So how do you go about that? What we actually do is we provide a token, WPQ, as a token that you put at the front of any of your names when you're doing scripting in the web part. So you put this token at the front end, and the dashboard will go through and replace that token with a unique ID such that your names will always be unique. Right? So it's quite important you do that. I think I've got a note about that later on. So that's a very simple web part. Once you've got the DDSC in here, you can do much more complex things. So, for instance, you can actually link web parts together. And I have here the Outlook folder view and item views. So I'm looking at my inbox at the moment. But if I go and click on calendar, it will pick up that I've changed to calendar in this web part and changed this web part. And we're using the DDSC to do this. So when I look on the folder view, when I select something in there, it's passed up to the DDSC and then passed back in to the actual Outlook view control and puts up the different view. So let's go and have a quick look at how that's done. And on the way, I'll just show you some of the structure that you actually have inside the dashboard in the file system. Okay, so what you have, obviously, it's all under inet pub, www-root, and we're running the demo dashboards. It would normally come up as dashboards there, and factory. Factory is obviously the code, the ASPs that are running. And we go into this, and you have a set of parts, and these parts are the parts that are the parts in the catalog. You then have a resources directory, and in general, if you have a web part that's using other resources on the machine, they would end up in that resources directory. So you can see this would normally be blank, but we're doing things like we've got the Outlook view control in here, and we've got the Office web components in here as well. So we're picking those up as part of the resources. You wouldn't normally get that. That would normally be blank. Then you have the dashboards themselves, and the welcome's the top-level dashboard, and we'll see this from inside the administration panel later on as well. You have an administration dashboard and the news and travel I showed you a moment ago. And at the top level, if you look in the top-level dashboard, these are the parts that this particular dashboard, this welcome dashboard, is actually using. And so if we go and have a look, for instance, at the folder view one that we were looking at a moment ago, how does the code work in this? Open with... Okay, so here's the code. Just make it a little bit bigger. Okay, and you can see what we have up here is, first of all, we actually have the DDSC function call. And we say, when we raise an event to this, on select, we pass in this view select value, and you can see we're using one of these WPQs identifiers, which is tokens which are replaced. And then we just have the select here, where you have a set of options, inbox, calendar, contacts, a set of options. And then on the click, we send those back up to our DDSC, pass back the view select here. Okay, and so it basically send that information back up to the DDSC. The DDSC then knows that it has the item view registered with it as well. So we can have a quick look at that. Okay, so this is the actual view itself. Format, font. Okay. And the actual main part of the script here is just calling the Outlook view control. This is the Outlook view control here. and passing in some values into that. And of course, we've also register for the event up here to the DDSC, and so that when the display view changes in here, it picks that up and sets that up to whatever is needed down for to render the correct view in the view control underneath. So that's how you can very easily go and use the DDSC. The thing about it, it really does, this sort of functionality of having interconnecting, communicating web parts on the screen is very powerful. As we move forward, it's probably going to be the area we're looking at in terms of providing customization inside the browser space, and indeed inside the Windows space for the desktop. We will certainly be looking at, we are looking at putting a lot of additional customization and personalized information into this DDSC as part of the state, and being able to use that as information about the users, so we can start to pull back the services they want from the information about the sort of things they're interested in. I don't know, hands up who used Tacit around here? Is anybody who was registered on the Tacit program? Tacit is a program which sits and actually looks at what you're doing and registers what your interests are. It's very similar to a product from Lotus, which I understand has just slipped, sad, called Raven. And Raven, they were meant to be announcing at the coming up Lotus Sphere. And Raven does exactly the same sort of thing. It monitors what people are doing and then stores that information back on the server. Now, of course, I don't know, certainly the people perhaps who use Tacit would find this, but it's all a bit Big Brotherish to me. I'm not too keen on some server somewhere other knowing exactly what email I'm doing and which web pages I'm looking at and all that sort of information, and using that inside the organization. So I actually think that Lotus have gone down the wrong track with Raven, and I think actually one of the reasons why they perhaps moved it back a little bit is because they may be running into that sort of problem. Because the key thing is that people want to personalize information on their desktops about what their interests are, so they can use that to start finding better information out on the web. What they're less keen about is people holding information about themselves, for the organization's use, right? And certainly when I was using Tacit, and I know that Tacit, you can switch that off in Tacit as well. Yeah, I know, and it is in Raven as well, but it just leaves you this queasy feeling, right? And I know you can turn it off, and I know how it works, and I've been through it, and I completely understand. And I'm not trying to knock Tacit. I'm just saying that I'm not sure how ready our user base is at the moment. The general population user base is for a lot of information being held on servers about what they're doing. It's not a technical thing. It's a social thing. Okay, but I believe that by collecting that sort of information in something like the DDSC, holding it on your laptop, where people are much more comfortable about having personal information held, then this is actually going to be a very powerful way of working forward. And it's certainly the sort of things we're looking at. Yep. What it does is, let me just switch back. I don't have an isolated part, but basically what it does is when this part would come up, if I had the isolate checkbox in, this would actually come in just as an iframe tag. So there'd be an iframe tag with the link underneath it and an end iframe. And what the browser does when it sees in IE5, when it sees one of these iframe tags, it actually starts up a complete new instance of the engine, of the Trident engine. So what would actually happen is in this space here, you would have your own mini copy of IE running. Yes, it is. It's running in this completely separate process. There's two copies. What you actually end up is you'll find you get two copies of IE running, okay? Which means that anything that happens in here, if this crashes, it will only take out one copy of IE. It won't take out the whole thing. But as I say, it does mean that because you're running in your own process space, it's very difficult to communicate, and the DDSC can't see it. Okay. Okay, so in terms of building a good web parts, you can start thinking about web parts as informational delivery parts, and that's both delivering information and delivering services. And so you need to start thinking about what it is that's actually needed just for that part, okay? Because if you have a part which has got like everything under the sun on there, then that's probably wrong. And you actually need to start splitting down things as individual web parts. Hands up people who've used Project Central here or looked at Project Central. Project Central is a really, really nice product, and you know, the customers really like it whenever I've demonstrated Project Central. And you can see straight away how nice it will be to have those pages of Project Central as web parts, because then you can configure exactly what it is you want. And probably one of the most requested features I get is, how can I put my Outlook alongside Project Central, some part of Project Central views or something like that. Now today you can do it by having, you know, one web part and then Project Central as the other web part, but it would be nice to have things like Project Central with all the parts of it as individual web parts. And I know the Project Central people are working hard on that and providing the whole of Project Central as web parts. Unfortunately, they wrote Project Central a while back, and it's quite difficult for them to modify some of that code. But that's what I'm talking about rethinking information delivery. Don't think about building a single page that's going to do everything for everyone. You just build the small components and let the people put together what they want. Allows you to personalize, gives you a consistent look and feel, supports offline because the content itself can be downloaded. Although, as I say, it's not terribly easy. The version 3.0 will get around a lot of those problems and support a lot more, provide a lot more support than that. And of course, Office 10 will as well, because Office 10 actually will be running IIS as well, or, you know, if you configure it correctly. So you'll actually have that running on the client, which will give you a lot more facilities. And again, portable, make sure the parts are self-contained, make sure that they have unique names, put the WPQ identifier in so that the dashboard can resolve the names for you. Okay, let's just quick talk about administration and deployment. In terms of file system dashboard, you have a root directory with the factory in it, I've shown you this, and the dashboards, and you have a dashboard for each individual user. So each user that comes in will have their own dashboard. When a new user comes in, the dashboard factory recognizes the new user ID and will go and generate the dashboard for that particular user ID and then populate it with a template. So this is nice because it means you have new users coming in, then you don't have to start building dashboards for each individual user. You build one template, you point to that template, and that template is then generated for everybody else. This is all covered in the documentation, and I can't remember what the name of the template is offhand. I looked at it yesterday, but I've forgotten. Say the factory itself sits in one set, and then you have these dashboards. The snag with this is, of course, if you have 1,000 users, you end up with 1,000 folders under WW root, one for each user. And of course, if then a user leaves or leaves the company or whatever, you have to go and clean that up. And we don't really have any tools to do that. So it's less than ideal from a large system deployment point of view. So we would recommend this for development. So you can develop your web parts and do small, 10, 20 user type deployment dashboards using the file system dashboard. And it works very well for that. There are a couple of sample dashboards in there, welcome administration as well. The SQL Server dashboard is the one we would recommend for much larger scale use, because what it does is it allows, because it's holding all the information back in SQL Server, you can then start using the SQL Server tools to maintain that. It actually, now rather than generating a complete dashboard and set of components for that dashboard, which you then have to maintain, it actually just stores those as part of SQL, a thing called SQL WebCat. And that's just held as a set of pointers inside the SQL Server, and so it is a lot more scalable than the file system dashboard, because you only have records in a database rather than folders and elements in a file system. Again, you have the welcome and administration sample dashboard. The interface is slightly different between the two because they are using slightly different code on the back end. Oops, wrong one. And then we've got the Exchange dashboard. We still haven't finished it. It's going to use the web store, hold the information in the web store at the back end. It will be part of Office 10. In fact, part of Office 10 Designer mod, Microsoft Office Designer. Because it's using the web store, we start getting, we're able to use the Outlook replication, the Outlook 10 replication from Exchange down to your desktop and back again. Which will give us a much better offline story, because now you're actually running pretty well the whole of the dashboard down the client, right? And you're running the dashboard server down the client, so it really improves our story in terms of both scalability and in terms of offline information as well. And then you'll have both personal and public folder-based web stores, dashboards in there as well. In terms of deploying these, so we haven't actually got any very large deployments, although there are a number of people who've come up to me at the conference today and said they have done large deployments. And if anybody else has got a large deployment story, I'd be very interested to hear from you. Mike PL at Microsoft.com. And these people have said that they have rolled out very large numbers of dashboards, but they have made some modifications on the back end. And again, I know that people are using the iframes to get around some of the problems there are. But the sort of deployment scenarios you can have is, first of all, a static one where you have just a really very tightly locked down dashboard. You can do this because the way the dashboard works is it just uses NT access permissions and NT ACLs. So you can say, okay, this particular web part is just read-only, okay, in the file system. So the users just cannot go and change any of those things. If they go into the layout screen I was showing you earlier and try and move stuff around, it just won't happen. It will drag things around the screen, but actually, of course, the back-end stores won't be updated. The file system stores won't be updated, and so nothing will actually change. So you can really lock it down from that point of view using the NT security. And it really just uses NT security and the NT security model and the NT permissions model to provide user access. Now, there is a problem with that, and that is that there's a sort of, you have read and modify permissions, but you actually also want the ability to modify just the attributes but not the content. You want to be able to, somebody to move a part somewhere else on the screen but not actually change the content link. And of course NT doesn't understand that. It doesn't have this midway concept. So have their own administration panel, and one of the checkboxes on that administration panel is actually allow the user to customize the part, but not actually to change any of the linkage or any of the content. Okay? So SQL Server is much better in giving you a sort of midway between a very rigid, locked-down dashboard and a dashboard which is completely flexible and free, and of course then anybody can change anything. So again, SQL Server for real deployments is probably better than the file system dashboard because it does have this intermediate concept. Okay, so let's have a quick look at some of the administration tools that come as part of the dashboard. Up here under settings, we have an, oops, sorry, that was the wrong one. Let me go back. Go back. Okay, so we have this administration dashboard here. So if we go into the administration dashboard, what it does is it's got a set of web parts, administration web parts that come as part of the kit again. I was on my machine today. Shut that down. Okay, so here's the administration dashboard. What you have is, first of all, you have 4 web parts on here. You have the dashboard view itself. Again, these are linked together using the DDSC. And so there's some example code in here which gives you a good idea of how to use the DDSC. So you have the dashboard view, set of dashboard properties for that dashboard, set of web parts that are associated with that particular dashboard, and then the properties for the web parts. So it goes ding, 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 in logical format. So if we drill down into our demo dashboards, we've got the parts I've talked about in the catalog, and welcome. You can see this is just a mirror of the file system underneath. And then we have the welcome dashboard, we have administration dashboard, news and travel dashboards. If we have a look at something like the administration dashboard, you can see the 4 parts, web parts we're using here. These are the properties for the administration, things like the name. And we'll go into more detail in a moment what's in there. And then we have things like, we've got dashboard properties in the middle, dashboard view on the left, web parts list, and web part properties, which are the elements the web parts we're working with at the moment. If we go and have a look at the top level welcome dashboard, you can see again, welcome. It's got information about the name, the style. We're using a standard style, but you can have multiple different styles in here. You can generate your own styles. This is just using cascading style sheets, so you just, if you want to, you can have your own corporate CSS, and it will go and pick those up. That's where you can do that. You can put special images in there, just as GIFs or JPEGs. And again, images for the navigation bar up at the top. You also have this idea of nested dashboards. You can have one dashboard, okay, and then you can have a sub-dashboard underneath that, and then a sub-dashboard underneath that. You can see that from here because this is our main dashboard, and these are sub-dashboards underneath that. And you can keep on going down. Do not go too deep, okay, because every time the dashboard runs, it has to resolve down those. If you go more than about 3 levels, then the dashboard's having to do a lot of work, right? So if you start making, they look very nice on, as pictures of these complex sub-dashboards of multiple functionality, but just it's not a good idea to go too deep on them. It causes a lot of work for the dashboard, right? Where else? navigation order, i.e. which order we navigate through the sub-dashboards, whether you want them refreshed automatically or not. And again, in general, if you're using parts that are refreshed, it's better to put them in their own iframe and refresh them inside the iframe, because otherwise you refresh the whole of the page. And then whether you want to use master parts or not. Okay, so these are our web parts list of the parts we've actually got on this particular dashboard. So if we go and have a look at one of them, say this regional sales detail, okay, you can actually then have all the information that we saw when we were going through the contents up on the top about the particular web part. And again, you can see all the information here about what the content is for that web part, and you can change that and save that. Okay, so another caveat here. What we're going to do is we're going to actually let's go and generate a sub dashboard of something like off welcome. There we go. Okay, go new. Okay. Okay, yes, thank you. I did need to refresh. Okay, so we've got a new dashboard 1 here. Okay, and another little trick here is that you'll notice the administration dashboard hangs underneath the welcome dashboard. If you go and change the welcome dashboard name, then it's quite easy to lose the administration dashboard at that point, you know, because you forget what the name is of the top level dashboard was, and the administration dashboard's hanging off that, and if you're not careful, you can lose the administration dashboard. It's quite easy to do it. So just be careful messing around with the welcome dashboard names. Okay, so we'll just call this team. We're going to generate some team dashboards, and we'll call this team as a name. We won't bother to change anything else. Save that. And then we'll go to that new dashboard, which we called, refresh. Our team dashboard. And you can see there's no web parts in here yet. So we're going to go and add some new web parts from the catalogue. Well, actually, we'll just, I'll do it from the catalogue rather from here. Let's just delete that one. Yeah, okay. Let's go back up and have a look. You can see I've now got my team dashboard up here. I can go and click on my team dashboard, nothing in it. So let's go and put something in it. And we'll go to the web part catalogue to do that. We've got a load of, as part of this demonstration CD, we've got a whole load of team web parts. So we've got members online, discussions, project, news and tasks. Go OK on that. And you can see it comes up. And you've got things like the calendar, project news, documents, discussions. These are mainly using view controls to go and get information up. So it's very quick and easy to build something like a complete team site here, to go and have a look at all the information to do with your particular team and add that in, as I say, as a new sub-dashboard inside your digital dashboard. Well, normally, yeah. This is where we get into the whole sort of workflow and team management space. I'm not pretending that this is a full team management sort of product. I mean, clearly you can send an email, which is the obvious answer. But, you know, you've got to remember there's a whole load of different products that we're coming out with which sort of address that in much more generic fashion. Tahoe has the ability to do that. Project has the ability to do that as well. You know, and it's built in and being able to do routing and that sort of notification type information. So if you're looking to build a full team-based system, and in fact Office 10 will as well, of course. If you're trying to build a full type system, you're better off with Project or with Tahoe than trying to do it all from scratch. But you could go and build all that from scratch if you wanted. Okay, so where are we going? a number of different products have picked up the concept of digital dashboard. It is a powerful concept, and they've picked it up. So in terms of clients, Office 10 are going to be providing, I've already said that. The Universal Canvas, which is NetDocs, which is part of the new front end for the .NET and browser-based. I don't think there's been any NetDocs talks here, but they're providing something that's similar to a digital dashboard. It's not actually quite the same. MSN is certainly looking at this sort of technology as well. We're also, interesting enough, just whilst I'm on the client, there's quite a lot of swing back inside Corp, back away from browser-based activity towards using the Windows 32 APIs and and providing Windows front ends, Windows client front ends. Perhaps the best example of that is a thing from MSN called Mars. Hands up, who's installed Mars? Okay. Yeah, a lot of people inside Corp are looking at Mars very heavily, and as are people like the NetDocs, and saying, okay, there's a lot of good functionality behind the browser, but wouldn't we be better actually having a Windows 32 front end because it gives us a lot more stability, a lot more functionality, that sort of area. Do go and have a look at Mars, it's quite interesting. So that's what's happening on the client side of things. In terms of the server, SQL Server will be shipping this. As I say, there's a large number of people in it. Tahoe is shipping it for the web store. Exchange will be shipping it as part of a future release of that. MLT, Microsoft Learning Technologies, are redoing. I know their present beta, which I think is beta 1, doesn't have web parts in it, but I know they're working on it. I've certainly seen a demonstration of it in MLT. So a number of different server-based areas are providing the dashboard as part of built-in functionality. Office 10 are going to provide as part of Office, the Office website you go to, and I can't remember the name of it. Yeah, there's an Office website where you go and you can pull information, add-ins for Office down, and they're going to be providing with Office 10 web part service up there, so you can go and save web parts and load them down. And then a number of the third parties, in particular the partners in terms of portal partners, Image, Plumtree, LinkU, are looking at using the dashboard as a front-end framework to their back-end portal services. And finally, something I must talk about is other devices as well, because there's a lot of interest in non-PC form factor type devices, so the Windows C device and handheld and telephones as well. And there are versions of the dashboard working on Pocket PC and also mobile phones and WAP type functionality. So you can go actually and get a dashboard coming up on a phone or on a Casio device there if you want. And again, SQL Server people working hard on that, and that's going to provide an awful lot of advantages in terms of our mobile story. And it works really, really very well as well. Okay. I think that most of the rest of this stuff, I talked about Office 10. I talked about web parts as part of the Universal Canvas. Oh, the other people is Microsoft.com are providing a dashboard as well, and they're well on the way to providing that also. Yeah, Office Designer is the way that you're going to interface that within 10. And finally, the important thing really actually about the digital dashboard is it, again, it's not a product, but it shows you and your customers some of the ways we're going with some of the future products, things like Tahoe, things like Office 10, what we're going to be providing in terms of user interface at the front end. And when they actually go and build things like web parts, because we've got a standard schema, and because third parties are picking up the schema, because all the different servers are picking up that schema, then we're in with a reasonable chance that if customers then use that schema, then we'll all actually be able to use get the same information, get the same look and feel on the screen. And that's really the idea behind certainly these two kits as they come out, is to show people how to do it and actually give them a framework where the base attributes are predefined and everybody knows where to look for those base attributes. As we move forward, we're going to have a lot of other attributes in there as well. But it is important, I think, we try and work to some sort of standard for how these attributes are held for content representation. Okay, so I've got about 10 minutes for questions. It gives you a quick idea. I say, please, please, please. A lot of what I said is thank you. Thank you very much.